President Trump opening new fronts in his attack on political adversaries. Just days after the controversial indictment of former FBI Director James Comey, the president has now turned his attention to two new targets. The first, Lisa Monaco, who served as Deputy Attorney General under President Biden, where she oversaw investigations into Trump and his associates. She is now Microsoft's President of Global Affairs, and President Trump is demanding she be fired from a private company. The second is Fani Willis, the Georgia District Attorney who charged President Trump in a sweeping election interference case. The New York Times reporting the Department of Justice has issued a subpoena for records related to her travel history. Let's bring in CNN's Kevin Liptak from the White House right now. And Kevin, the president's demands toward Lisa Monaco, really just the latest example that we're seeing of him using this power of the presidency to both pressure private companies and then more broadly with the DOJ and James Comey to prosecute his political adversaries.
Yeah, that's right. And his sort of gripes against Lisa Monaco seem to stem from her role as the Deputy Attorney General in the Biden administration when the Justice Department and a special counsel were investigating Trump's role in mishandling of classified documents in his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And it is those investigations that are really at the heart of the president's campaign for retribution. You know, you heard him talk about this just yesterday, saying that they did it to me for 4 years, essentially justifying what he said it was a campaign of weaponization, and saying that this was now his efforts to essentially repay that. And the president, I think, being pretty explicit here in what he's seeking to achieve. He says that Lisa Monaco is a menace to U.S. national security. He's not talking about indicting her like he did with James Comey, but he's saying that it's necessary for Microsoft to terminate her employment, saying that he's banned her from federal properties. He already stripped her of her access to classified information back in February. And I think, one, it just goes to show about how much pressure the president is putting in the corporate world against his perceived enemies. You've seen him do this in the past. It's sort of an unprecedented sort of foray into corporate affairs, whether it's at Disney, whether it's at Intel, now at Microsoft. I also think it's interesting who is claiming credit for bringing this to the president's radar. It's Laura Loomer. She's the far-right activist. She said that she alerted Trump to the fact that Monaco had been hired at Microsoft, and she's saying to the CEO, are you going to comply? And so you see all of these things coming together. You know, I asked the president yesterday who was next on this list in his campaign of retribution. He claimed that there wasn't a list that he's working on, but he was pretty explicit that there will be others. He says, I hope there will be others, making pretty clear that this is sort of a center now of his presidency.
Yeah. All right. Kevin Liptak with the latest there from the White House. Thank you so much for that. And as the president says that to Kevin, that there will be others, it all comes after, of course, this indictment of James Comey. Prosecutors accusing the former FBI director of making a false statement to Congress about an anonymous leak. And a source familiar with the incident telling CNN this person Comey allegedly authorized to leak, referred to as, quote, person 3, is his longtime friend and Columbia Law School professor Daniel Richtman. Richtman was a special government employee at the FBI at the time. Let's bring in CNN senior legal analyst Elie Honig. He's a former federal and state prosecutor. He's also the author of a new book out this month, When You Come at the King, Inside DOJ's Pursuit of the President from Nixon to Trump. Elie, I do want to talk about your book in just a moment. But let's start first with this latest news. Person 3. What does this tell you about the strength of the government's case here and how they're working through this?
Well, Jess, this new reporting gives us and the public some specificity that's not actually contained in the indictment itself. So it is really important to know that person 3 is this person, Daniel Richtman, and the allegation is that Jim Comey authorized him to leak, but then lied to Congress about that. The number one problem I see is if you look at the clip where Jim Comey's being questioned by Senator Ted Cruz back in 2020, the question that Ted Cruz poses to Jim Comey is not at all clear. In fact, there are 3 or 4 subparts to that question. And then Jim Comey's response is simply, I stand by my prior testimony. If you're going to bring a perjury prosecution and get a conviction as a prosecutor, you need to have a clean, clear question and a clean, clear, false answer. I don't see that at all with respect to that exchange. There's no mention of Daniel Richman whatsoever. So I think prosecutors have picked themselves a tough fight here, and I think the record itself is confused. The other thing, Jessica, just as an indicator, we learned yesterday that only 14 grand jurors out of 23 voted for this. It's a much, much lower bar in the grand jury. There's no defense lawyer present. You only need a majority, and you only need to show probable cause. If they can only get 14 in the grand jury, good luck getting all 12 by a higher standard with a defense lawyer there at trial.
And Trump has been quite vocal about this. Last night, he posted online calling Comey, in his words, a dirty cop, thanking the FBI and DOJ for this indictment. What does that mean for this case, as you mentioned, once they get into a courtroom?
Yeah, this is more than just atmospherics and politics. This will be part of the record because Jim Comey's defense team, in all likelihood, is going to make a motion to dismiss based on what we call either selective or vindictive prosecution. It's really hard to win on those arguments. I've seen all sorts of defendants raise them because you have to show that you as a defendant were singled out for prosecution for political or other improper purposes. Now, ordinarily, it's really hard to show that type of motivation. Here you have Donald Trump's social media feed. I mean, almost on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day, he's celebrating the fact that this prosecution happened. He's obviously putting it in political terms. So this is going to become part of the court record. This is going to become the basis for a defense motion to dismiss this indictment before it ever even gets to a trial.
And so we're now headed for an arraignment that's set for October 9th here in just a few days. As you lay it out, and I'm listening to you lay it out, it looks like this is going to be very tricky, very difficult for the government to get what they want here. That being said, it seems probable that a lot of this is just about the chilling effect and the message that this could send to anybody like James Comey that's perceived as having done wrong by the president.
Well, I think that's exactly why there's so much concern here. Look, I don't have any particular feelings for or against Jim Comey. I don't find him to be a sympathetic character. But the reason that I think there's a real issue and real reason to be concerned here is because of the overtly political nature of this prosecution, because of the sequence we saw play out over the last week when Donald Trump went on Truth Social and ordered his attorney general to bring this case. He named names, he named Jim Comey, he named others. And then days later, we have the pushing out of the veteran conservative U.S. attorney in that district, the replacement of that person with Lindsay Halligan, a completely inexperienced novice and political loyalist. And we end up with this indictment. So I would urge people, it doesn't really matter what you think of Jim Comey, good, bad, or otherwise. It's a real problem if we have the president ordering DOJ to undertake political prosecutions.
All right. And I do want to mention your new book, When You Come at the King. You talked to dozens of people involved in prosecuting presidents and top officials over the last 50 years. 5-0. And so you've gone back and really done the research here. In your view, how does what we're seeing right now and what's happening right now fit into this larger historical picture?
It's fundamentally different what's happening now. You know, there has been a through line from Watergate to Iran-Contra to Ken Starr and Bill Clinton, all the way up through Mueller and Robert Hur and Jack Smith. And the through line there is no president likes these investigations. What president would ever want a special prosecutor poking around in his administration? And certainly presidents have a long and varied record of undermining and at times obstructing those cases. But up until now, every president has understood that they're necessary, that they're part of our system, they're necessary for accountability and good government. What Donald Trump is doing now is just to say there will be no such inward-looking investigation. There's no chance of that. And as we saw on bright display this week, anyone who does even consider that or has ever investigated him will be the subject of retribution. So it's a fundamental change from what we've seen going back as far as Watergate and beyond that.
And I think that seems to be the important thing, because we are all inundated with so many pieces of information, and this is all happening so quickly that it's easy to kind of just brush it off as another thing. But I think putting it into that historical context is really, really important. You also interviewed members of Robert Mueller's team, who played, of course, quite a role in Trump's first term. How do you see the president having changed from that first term and what was going on then to what we're seeing now?
When you look back at the appointment of Robert Mueller, which happened early in Donald Trump's first term, it's a miracle that that actually happened. Nothing like that would be permitted to happen now. But several people at the Justice Department did the right thing. Jeff Sessions properly removed himself from that case. He was the Attorney General. Rod Rosenstein took over and did the right thing in appointing a special counsel. Now, there's plenty of issue to be taken with the way Robert Mueller carried out his investigation. I spoke to members of his team. I spoke to members of Trump's team. I spoke to White House officials in the Trump White House. And so I thought it was interesting. Some members of Mueller's team actually said they wished he had handled the case differently and been more decisive, more clear when he announced his findings. So that's part of the history records now. But we're not going to see a Robert Mueller or anything like that over the next 3 years. And really, the pitch in the book that I make at the end is whoever comes next, we do need an independent DOJ. We do need a system for imposing accountability on the administration. As uncomfortable as it may be, it's a crucial part of who we are as a government.
Yeah, and it underpins in a real way our democracy. Elie Honig, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.